Dr. Miller highlighting the second of our set and reps strategies. This one would be cluster reps. Before I get started, just a reminder, if you're interested in hearing more about this topic and others in the field of exercise and sports science, nutrition science, subscribe to this channel, like this video, and if you have any comments, drop them below. All right. So cluster reps or cluster sets is in the line of rest pause, which I'll also talk about. It just has a different approach than your traditional rest pause. Cluster reps are focused on more on preserving maximal force and force output and dynamic movement. So think about the size principles of motor unit recruitment, which I have a video on if you're interested. A little background, the three ways in which we can utilize that physiological understanding, that physiological concept. Henneman's size principle of motor unit recruitment is, basically how do we get to these big type 2X fibers highlighted here. And so I leave this little figure on these slides that I've been creating about these set and rep schemes, because this is really what a lot of what these different strategies and schemes are about. And so when it comes to cluster reps, the whole point is this is not to failure like you might find in a rest pause. Okay, so that's some of the distinguishing things. That's what I'm getting at is cluster reps or sets is more about preservation of quality of movement. And so an example might be in a recent study, doing 3 sets of 5 versus doing 3 sets of 5 instead of doing them straight in a row, those 5 reps, doing them with 30-second break between each rep. And so there's a fair amount of research emerging on this idea of clustering. And so a cluster could be 1 rep at a time. So 5 reps with 30-second break. It could be a 15-second break. It could be reps that are clustered in 2, which is more common. So doing 2 reps, let's say a set of 6, 2 reps, rest 30 seconds, rack the bar, put it down, whatever. Do another. Now, this is going to be more applicable to like compound movements and less in isolation movements. You're going to think more movements that you want to see maximal strength expressed in more dynamic or high bar velocity movements utilized than, let's say, going into an isolation movement. So it could be good for like cleans, Olympic style weightlifting movements, squat work, deadlifts, anytime there's some sort of quality component. Now, how this would look and why these I believe cluster rep sets are valuable in the research literature to support this, at least the bulk of it, is that working up into these higher threshold motor units, when we do that, we gather all the other motor units along the way, hypothetically, type 1, type 2A, and if there's any, then we utilize the type 2X fibers. And so we would do it in such a way that doesn't necessarily fatigue all these. It's more of a neurological practice, and so you learn how to synchronization here, and coordinate. So I think of this like like an orchestra, learning how to pull in the percussion and the wind and all these different areas at the right time, and learning how to play together to make a beautiful sound. Well, that takes practice, of course, and this is when you use a cluster rep, it allows us to synchronize the motor units better, and it's not under fatigue, and so we haven't exhausted the percussions like we would maybe in a rest pause, and now they're out of the picture, and so now all we're left with is just the wind instruments and whatever. And so that's the value in doing a cluster. So you do, instead of that, at the end of that set of 5, even if you left 1 to failure, you might have knocked out some of these fibers, or some of these motor units, excuse me. And so now your total force expression is going to be less. That's why the bar may slow down. Okay. Whereas if you rest, you're going to get maximal bar velocity. And it's important that you can't lazily do cluster. You have to attack the reps and be thinking about bar velocity when you're executing the concentric portion of the movement in particular. That's going to ramp up, grab the bit, and then you rest and then do it again. And so you're basically going up and down the size principle by resting and then lifting heavy, or moving quickly and then coming back down again. So we're getting this practice in. We're getting exposure of the fiber to these motor units to training. And over the course of sets, yes, you're not going to fatigue them like you were, but you're looking at quality of movement and coordination of the inside the muscle itself. So the intramuscular coordination. So it's all about those high frequency motor units. It's all about synchronization. Another valuable tool that's always used in Olympic style weightlifting is technique. Okay, so if you did a set of 4, at 80%, those last 2 reps are going to get kind of sloppy because you're tired, and there could be some value in that. But if you're in a sport where you really want to be technically sound, it'd be better to do 2 reps, knowing that the third one's not going to be pretty. Rest for 15 to 30 seconds, more likely 30 seconds is a typical rest interval, and then do the last 2 reps in the set with that 80%. That's your set. Rest 2, 3 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever it may be, 3 to 5 minutes maybe, depending on what you're doing, and then do the same thing. So it maintains movement quality. Again, this is all of cluster is all about movement quality. And thinking about Maximal and the dynamic method rather than the repetition. This is not necessarily a great way to build muscle mass, although I have used kind of a hybrid between rest pause and clusters. So rest pause would be more get after it and then keep going. You could cluster though. I'll cluster front squat sets. So like a set of 10, you could do 5 reps, rest for 30 seconds, or even 15 if you wanted more of a hypertrophy type of stimulus, and then do 5 more reps. Why? Because when you do a high rep set of front squats, it's easy to lose the position, and all of a sudden you're doing a lower back, upper back exercise rather than utilizing the lower extremity. And so by taking that 15-30 second rest, you can still maintain enough of the metabolic milieu and the time under tension with that heavier load that is still quality that a straight set would provide, but you get a chance for the athlete to rest and then readjust their position and then get back and finish those last 5 reps with quality. Okay, is it as good as a straight set when it comes to hypertrophy? I would say no, but does it help to maintain the training load and maintain more of the movement quality than would be without taking the break? Yes. Okay, so everything's on somewhat of a continuum, right? And so we take away a little bit of optimal hypertrophy and we move it just a little bit closer to optimal movement quality. And so that's what a cluster can do. You're sacrificing some of the potential hypertrophic stimulus for movement quality. And so, for a bodybuilder, doing high rep front squats may not be a good idea anyway, at least not on a freestanding barbell, maybe like on a Smith machine or something like that. And taking clusters may not be as good of an idea, especially somebody who knows how to move the weight. So in other words, their experience and their technique is solid. But for a weightlifter who's interested in moving heavier loads with quality and maintaining that position with a free barbell, these type of cluster arrangements could make more sense. You could do 15 reps as a 5 plus 5 plus 5. Again, keeping in mind the lower the rest periods, the more you're moving to a hypertrophic response, and the more you move away from that to more of a 30-second rest period interval between your clusters, you're looking more at quality. Both will produce hypertrophy. One's just going to be a little better at it than the other. Both can produce improvements in force, but one of them the clusters is going to be better at synchronizing the movement, and again the technique will be better. Okay, so I'm not saying cluster rep sets is the best way to train. It's a tool. All these methods are tools. You have to know when a cluster may make sense. If you're an Olympic style weightlifting coach, you're probably going to utilize these at some point for athletes who are trained. If you really want high quality movement at higher intensities, doing a cluster is going to make a lot of sense. If you're training for bodybuilding with a bunch of machines, may not be something you would employ at all. But if hypertrophy is the goal, know the time to use it and the times not to. Know the underlying concept, which is getting to these big motor units and doing it in such a way without a lot of fatigue, at least when we're thinking about looking slanted hard towards maximal and dynamic training. If we want to work it into the hypertrophy type of training then, and still thinking about pulling in some of that movement quality still and maintaining more of the motor units before completely exhausting them, then a cluster could be valuable. Again, I find that useful when doing like squat training with higher reps for people that are more strength and power focused. If it's just straight hypertrophy though, especially sarcoplasmic type hypertrophy, then the straight set might be best. You might have to adjust your mode of exercise to something that allows for good technique all the way through the movement if somebody isn't comfortable with that technique. I'm thinking like a barbell back squat. They can't maintain that technique as you get into set, deep into high rep sets, 10 plus, even 8 plus, depending on the person is. Okay, I think I've said enough on clusters. Again, if you have any comments or questions, even drop them in the comments below. I'd be happy to take a look at them. I'm going to continue to make these videos, these set and rep schemes. I'm not advocating one or the other. Again, I'm just advocating them as tools for you to utilize at the right time. This may be something that you find valuable in your strength and power work in particular.